This week's episode is sponsored by the War for the Tower podcast. If you're not interested in an actual play RPG podcast set in the universe of Stephen King's Dark Tower, though, why not try out some other shows with the same host? The network is called Sinister Parent Company, and under that umbrella there's Good Idea, a comedy podcast about solving real-life problems, Shattered Worlds, another actual playcast based on a tabletop game that Jeff created, and Everything is Awesome, which is a podcast about art, music, and life. You can find out more by searching any of those titles on your podcatcher and follow the network on Twitter at twitter.com/sinparentco. Find the War for the Tower podcast at warforthetower.com or search War for the Tower on your podcatcher. Long days and pleasant nights.
This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Doctor Who Season 6, Episode 6, The Almost People. In this episode, first of all, rude. Second of all, what the fuck is going on? I think that I don't know what to think about this. I don't think I like it. Welcome to Unspoiled. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Jamie. I feel like it's one of the first times I've heard you, just kind of stop and, have nothing. What? Okay.
I just don't... Okay. I am on record through my various other shows as really not liking the magical pregnancy trope.
Yeah.
And this is one of those that's kind of maybe doesn't count because the pregnancy isn't necessarily magical. It seems like it seems like what we're going to eventually find out is that this is Rory's baby, but Amy got taken somehow. But I just don't need a terrified pregnant woman being victimized in my story, if that's cool. So I'm a little bit worried about it. That's all.
I understand where you're coming from. What the reaction that I had with this was, wait a minute. So how long has this not been Amy? Mm-hmm. And we know that when the doctor started scanning her at the end of Day of the Moon, is that what that episode's called? Episode 2 of this season.
Okay.
That's when the TARDIS scanner was pregnant, not pregnant, pregnant, not pregnant. So we can assume at the very least, from that point on, this hasn't been Amy. Mm-hmm. Which is crazy. So that's kind of what I focused on, was she's been seeing this lady in the walls, and that hasn't made any sense. And now we find out that she's a ganger, but when did that happen? Right. And how did that happen? And for me, that's a bigger question than, any annoyance I may have with, sudden pregnancy, but I also appreciate that I didn't have to spend an entire season. No offense, anybody I know that is pregnant, has been pregnant, whatever. I didn't have to spend a season of pregnancy stories with one of my main characters. So for me, this is a nice sci-fi workaround.
Now, see, that's the thing, is that the pregnancy stories normally, when my problem with the magical pregnancy is that it feels like a shortcut because we don't want to tell pregnancy stories. We just want
100%.
the child, or whatever the fuck it is. Looking at you, Dark Tower. And
I laugh. I have no idea what you're referring to. I've never read those books.
Girl, they are really quite an exercise in disappointment. What a series for letting you down after really building you up. But the way that it ends, with her literally screaming in fear, in pain, and alone, other than this weirdo woman, really fucked me up a little bit. I have a huge fear of, in general, just anything that's like gynecological trauma. And that is something that a lot of women over history have dealt with at the hands of psychopathic doctors or people who were experimenting, trying to find stuff out, especially women of color. And Puerto Rican women were like forcibly sterilized like recently in this last century. And so this sort of thing I just find really upsetting. It's not exciting. It's not interesting. It just upsets me. And
that's valid.
So that kind of overshadowed for me. Oh, it wasn't Amy the whole time. I felt like they wanted it to be fun in that way, and I couldn't get past what was going on with her to do that. It was just too much. And to have it be that she wasn't even aware of her own, like this isn't a ganger that was like apparently sent out separate from her that she didn't know about and was fully aware of her own situation the whole time. It seems as if her consciousness was out in it and she didn't know what was happening to her. So she's experiencing a magical pregnancy, at least on her end of things,
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what it is the real Amy has been sort of in this pod.
Right.
I don't know if she's been sedated this whole time, but her consciousness has obviously been linked in the same way that we see with like Cleves and her ganger has a headache, in the same way that Cleves has a headache, but Cleves knows why. She knows there's something wrong. She's had tests done. She hasn't gotten the results yet. The ganger doesn't understand the headache. And
doesn't that not make sense? The ganger's supposed to have all her memories.
It's true.
Why doesn't she know?
It's an oversight. But yes, you're right. But it seems like this Amy ganger was made a little differently to not know that she's a ganger at all.
Right.
So she's got all of Amy's memories the way that the other gangers do, but she's not aware that she's not Amy.
I wanted to mention, too, that Austin Armenio commented on the last entry that we were, like, not correct about how the gangers worked. Because we thought, we were talking about how the gangers are always a complete duplicate. But they weren't. It was that solar storm that caused a complete mind copy. It says, from the wiki, gangers were mimicked body duplicates of individual humans who controlled their gangers through telepathic remote control via a specially designed harness.
What? Where does it even say that in the episode?
That was my understanding when we started it off until you and I started talking. And then I was like, oh, okay, so it's not that. So
is that why they're asleep on those?
On the harnesses, yeah. Because I was like, I didn't understand why that was set up that way. If they had a complete copy, then these people don't need to be here.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but because of the solar storm, then the humans woke up and the gangers were still existing.
And there was like some sort of like, the flare caused a copy to be imprinted in their minds of all their memories and everything.
Okay.
So maybe that's how it works with Amy wherever she is, that wherever she is pregnant, she's like telepathically controlling this ganger, but she isn't aware that's what's happening. So she is she's controlling all the actions of this thing, but doesn't know that it is not her.
Right. And when ganger Amy is seeing this woman in a, sliding a door open and her, checking in.
Mm-hmm.
That's because the actual Amy is seeing that woman doing that from the inside of her pod, and that's like filtering into the consciousness of the Ganger Amy.
Because I would imagine that this one person being the only one that you have any contact with ever probably does induce some trauma that bleeds through.
Right. It's almost like
alternate reality.
It's almost like the Amy that's in the pod, the real Amy, is in like a dream state all the time. And so those dreams are sort of filtering through to her Ganger, or what feels like dreams. Mm-hmm. But the Ganger Amy is like, what the hell? Why am I even seeing this? So weird. And then most of the time she doesn't even mention it. Has she ever mentioned it?
No, this was the first episode where she says something to anybody about it.
Right, and the doctor says something about it being like, I forget what he calls it, like a time memory or something.
Yeah, which I was just like, the doctor's behavior this episode really irritated me, unsurprisingly. There was the actual funny part of him congratulating himself, which was great. But when it comes time to, like, explain to Amy what's going on, he doesn't do it.
No,
and
he
just
doesn't.
zaps her with
He
no
also
explanation.
Doesn't explain it to Rory.
No. And I do not understand writing a script this way. The amount of time that they stand staring at one another and Rory slowly steps backward is plenty of time for there to be any sort of conversation about what's going on. And they just have the doctor essentially be like, well, after what we just went through, I'm pretty sure you can guess what I'm about to say. And Rory just is like, oh my God, yeah, I do get it. And I'm like, there is no reason for you to get it though. How is this something that you're just accepting with no evidence and no further explanation and stepping away from her? So I just didn't understand why would you not tell him what the fuck is going on here?
He does and he doesn't, because he says that the whole reason that they came to this factory, because originally he did try to drop them off somewhere else and go do this on his own. But it seems like the TARDIS just took them there. So the TARDIS probably knew that, Amy and Rory need to experience this as well.
Right.
But he wanted to study the flesh enough to understand it so he could figure out how to stop the signal it has to Amy, so that then they can go and find Amy. And I'm sure all of that is enough for Rory to be like, okay, I need more details. Mm-hmm. And the audience does too, but the nature of the TV show, they want to leave it on a cliffhanger so that we are excited for the next episode. And I do believe that the way these aired, that the next episode was sort of a mid-season break. So it's kind of like leading up to a finale.
If they want to leave it as a cliffhanger, they can do it without it being like this. I mean, if they want to leave it as a cliffhanger and the doctor refusing to explain anything, he can just not tell Rory to move aside and not have this big moment and be like, hey, Rory, I'm sorry about this, and I'm sorry, Amy, and then just do it, leaving Rory standing there where a pile of dust now is, going, what the fuck did you just do? Which I would be more accepting of, because Lord knows the doctor is an asshole and probably would handle it that way. But Rory's, trust in him in that moment felt out of character to me, when he has been so devoted to Amy this whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Taking a step backward and putting her in potentially harm's way with no real evidence didn't feel like Rory to me. So, let's back up, shall we? Mm-hmm. Alright, so we start off with the gangers in their acid suits. Very helpful for figuring out who is who. And then cut to the doctor and his copy. And this copy is so unnerving at first. Once he resolves and his face is the doctor's face and there's two of them, it's fine. It's great. But initially when he's got that fucking flesh face, oh no, I just don't like these flesh faces. And there's something much worse about seeing the flesh face after you've seen the regular person face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the two of them are just over there, like, gassing each other up. It's really funny, actually. Like, I really wouldn't mind having Rory and Amy. They may not trust both of us. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Inevitably. You see, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. See? Great minds. Exactly. So what's the plan? Save them all, humans and gangers. Tall order. Sounds wonderful. Is that what you were thinking? Yes, it's just so inspiring to hear me say it. I know. Honestly, that's hilarious. And I should mention that when I was watching this episode, I was doing so via my phone with my headphones in. And when they each talked, they each came through a different speaker.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so it was
That's
like they
funny.
were standing on either side of me, and I thought that was a really nice detail to add that I wouldn't have caught if I was watching it on TV.
You know, I didn't catch that because I've only watched it on TV, but that puts some forethought into, like, people having surround sound systems potentially, so you're hearing a voice coming from one part of the room and then another part of the room.
Right.
Or, because I'm sure they weren't thinking about people watching it on their phones with headphones because that really wasn't a thing yet when this aired.
I wonder, like, I mean, you know what? I didn't pay attention if that happens with the other gangers as well. I noticed it in particular because this was kind of a long conversation between the two of them. Mm-hmm. But
the others don't, like, have conversations with their gangers very much.
Yeah, it doesn't have,
way.
like, there's, what's his face that when he's dying, he has the conversation with, but it's so drawn out and very slow that it didn't stand out to me if that was happening or not.
Yeah. Is this, the part that you're talking about, is that after he like, stabilizes? Because before that, the voices of several other doctors come out of him.
It is after he stabilizes, yes. Yes, you're right. I forgot about how there's that whole thing. Where he's talking about the jelly babies?
Yeah, that was something that I believe the fourth doctor really liked jelly babies, which I believe are just gummy bears, maybe, or maybe jelly beans.
All right, I'm looking up some jelly babies, and if they are on Amazon, I'm going to order them, and we can try some jelly babies.
That didn't work out so well for you with those Jammy Dodgers, which I still enjoy.
No, but Owen loved them, so he ate them.
Jason likes them too.
Okay, they look like gumdrops.
Oh. Okay.
But they might, like, if they were sour, I would be all about this.
I used to love gumdrops when I was a kid, and now my memory of what they taste like I don't know, not chalky, because they're not chalky, but...
They do look like, they look like Sour Patch Kids. Like, their shape, they look like they use that mold to make them.
Okay, I'm looking them up
they're
now.
like vaguely person-shaped, but they look like they're covered in powder instead of, like, you know, sour sugar or whatever.
Right.
Wild. Why powder?
Natural.
Okay.
Natural jelly babies.
Yeah, this is a really okay. Anyway,
I think we should order some and try them.
These are sold in like 2-pound bags for $30. So I'm going to say no to that.
Wait. Scroll down. Let's see. I'm not paying $20 for a bag of candy.
See, that's my thing. There's some by Taverners, which are $9. But I don't know, man. I don't think I'm going to like these. I don't know if I want to risk it.
All right. Well, maybe I will.
Okay, you can do that.
Okay. I'm going to keep this page open and I'll come back to it later.
Especially since, like, the first and top-rated review is tastes awful, smells worse. So,
Well,
I'll pass.
I'll order some. I'll try to order the smallest quantity I can, and if I don't like them, my boyfriend will probably eat them anyway. And if they're really bad, whatever, just throw them out. I'm willing to take one for the team here.
All right. So, yeah, he has stabilized and has this conversation with himself. Everybody else has started to notice that the gangers have begun to quiet down, and they get nervous about this. And we see the two doctors approach Amy, and she takes note of their shoes. And this leads to the whole thing with her thinking that she knows which one the real doctor is. And eventually finding out that they tricked her. Which, Amy, come now. Of course he did. Girl, see this coming. Of course he did. And it's meant to make the point that the ganger is just as much of a person.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, at no point this episode do they cope with what it means for the two to coexist and both survive. Like, we have a doctor running around still, and potentially a Cleves, maybe.
They probably did not survive.
It doesn't seem likely.
Yeah. So really, we do not have the answer to that question because there is no version of each that lived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have two dudes who died and their gangers basically take their places.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine, I guess. But that feels like it's really like this episode set up an interesting and genuine question and then totally sidestepped actually answering it.
Yep.
So, it's fine. But this whole thing too with Rory and Jennifer.
Mm.
Rory, babe. How did you not notice what was going on? When she is like, I can't seem to turn this. I'm such a weak young lady. Are you feeling strong? Yes. Oh, no, I do need your handprint, though, because I'm, for some reason, also too weak to lay my hand against this hand scanner. Rory. And then it specifically says, human detected. And I'm like, Rory! Yeah. And no, still nothing. Still not checking in.
We just had a conversation before we started recording about how neither of us immediately trust people.
Mm-hmm.
This is why.
Mm-hmm.
Like, anything humanoid is not inherently trustworthy to start. I always assume people are lying. And she proved it. And Rory's too trusting.
Rory, it's not even just trust, it's paying attention.
Yeah.
Well,
he wants to... I don't know. He believed that it was Jennifer. And this is like after he thought that the ganger Jennifer had died.
Mm-hmm.
So he, had no reason to assume that she had made another ganger of herself in order to trick him.
He didn't have a reason to assume that, but he definitely had reason to believe that once she did not lay her own hand on that thing. It would be one thing if he saw her attempt to do something, she genuinely couldn't do it, and then asked for him to step in. But she goes straight to him to do a thing that requires a human being specifically.
Yep.
And he doesn't see her even attempt it. And I really with what's happening right now, and one being, surrounded by copies of people, whether or not you think that she had the reason to make a second copy, that is not relevant to the fact that it is possible to make a second copy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He was too trusting and a little bit I don't think that Rory is a dumb character most of the time. He's very caring
mm-hmm.
and empathetic. And sometimes, has a lot of questions because things are happening that he doesn't understand and they're not being explained to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not stupid.
No.
And, yeah, this is a moment where you're like, wait, Rory,
mm-hmm.
you are smarter than this.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, I don't know. I got very frustrated because it felt like there was this setup for this episode to have, like, and it's weird because as much as the whole thing with Amy and the reveal about her having been a ganger and the pregnancy and everything was annoying, at least it felt like an actual twist that I didn't see coming, because the whole episode is Amy arguing with Mr. Smith about how the other doctor is the real one and nobody can replace him. And I, like, totally called that they had switched shoes and that she was, like, arguing the wrong side of things. And then this thing with Rory, I called that there was another copy and that was what was going on. And it takes a while for these to, like, be revealed and pay off. But they felt, like, obvious to me. So I was just sort of sitting there waiting for the characters to catch up, which is never a feeling that I enjoy when I'm watching a thing. I don't like to be ahead of the characters, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and on second watch or third watch, whatever this ended up being, I think this is the fourth time I've watched this episode, every time it's more and more obvious that those are the things that are going on.
Right.
So it's not because I know that's what's happening. It's because I'm noticing, like, you are telegraphing this way harder than this show has done in a long time.
Yeah, I don't feel like I needed to have a close-up on their shoes right after the two of them talking to one another about whether they're having the same idea. And I didn't need the human detected after he gets his hand scanned, because I think I can tell, you know, if you didn't do that, I would kind of be like, oh, I wonder if XYZ. And at least that keeps me interested because I'm not sure. But when you do it like that, there's no doubt in my mind. So it's just kind of like, well, that's what's happening.
I wonder if it's notes like that, because for the last season and a half now, since Moffat took over, we haven't had a whole lot of, like, shoving things in your face of, like, this is what's happening, wink. He, with all of his, you know, mystery shit, that's not how he runs this show. He lets us learn as the characters learn.
Right.
So I really do wonder if these are BBC America or BBC notes. Like, there's a lot going on in this episode and people might get confused, so we need to sort of make sure that the audience catches what's going on, or they're just going to be more confused at the end. And it sounds to me, or it seems to me, the kind of studio notes that dumb down programming a lot of the time.
Yeah. Possibly.
Because in the previous episode, there was a lot of exposition so that we understood what these gangers are.
Right.
And they didn't have to dumb down anything in order for that to be understood by us. This episode isn't anywhere near as potentially confusing because we already we've established the issue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Like, these are really obvious things. The focusing on the shoes. They did do a tiny shot of that in the last episode when he loses his shoes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think that was just to, like, make us understand that he had to take them off because they were getting burned by the acid. So
that didn't feel like a setup of anything.
Right, and then he says something about, like, lost my shoes in the acid. And I understand, like, wanting to, like, bring that back a little bit, like, oh yeah, I lost my shoes, so I have these shoes on. That's why our shoes don't match.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, you don't need to say anything because you need to trust that your audience is paying attention. And these kind of dumbing downs just really feel like, you know, suits around a conference room table picking apart, like, well, I didn't understand it, so no one else is going to either.
Right. Well, so we had, okay. One thing that I did think was pretty dope, though, that I did not see coming at all, was at one point we passed by Jennifer in the hallway, who's using the flesh to draw eyes on the walls. And eventually, when we come back, those are just eyes on the walls.
I didn't notice that at all.
You didn't notice what?
That she was drawing eyes on the wall.
How did you miss it?
I don't know. Because I've watched it several times, and it's not like I wasn't paying attention. I was fully paying attention, and somehow, like, I guess it just I never thought about what she was doing, so I watched it but didn't, like, retain it. Mm-hmm. It's just like she's doing something and there's a lot happening.
Right.
Like, yeah, I didn't notice at all that that's what she was doing. But I did find the eyes on the wall later, like, well, that's just fucking creepy. Like, is this necessary?
Yeah, that was like, so as much as I'm about to just be like, well, I do really enjoy that she drew eyes on the wall with flesh and then they became real eyes. Because that's just bonkers and weird. Well, however, that doesn't sound like how that would work.
That makes the wall of eyes make more sense to me. Because I was just like,
yeah, you thought that just happened?
I didn't know why. I was just like, that's really weird.
Yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I believe that this is meant to be the flesh that she has vomited up. Which is also horrifying.
She only vomited up the flesh that one time, though.
That's what I thought, but otherwise, I don't know where this is coming from. I didn't see, like, a bucket of flesh that she just carried with her to do this.
Well,
you know?
There is the whole vat of the tub. There
is, but, like, if you look at the scene where she's doing this, she's got a lot. So she would have had to have, like, some right there. And either way...
Well, she's an evolved ganger because she's able to, like, stretch herself and make another version of herself. So maybe she just created more. Maybe she chopped off her own hand and then grew a new one, like a lizard.
She chopped off her own hand. It turned into liquid. She put it in a bucket. She regrew her hand, and then she drew the eyes on the wall with what had been her hand and is now a bucket of goo.
She can also make her head stretch and make her face stretch and then turn into whatever the fuck that was at the end.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, like, so, and see, that's the thing, is that these eyes being, like, here independent of anything else is a really weird, like, it's not like something got copied and put and turned into it. She's just drawn eyes, and apparently these, like, third grade finger paintings know exactly what they're supposed to be and look like.
You know what I think I thought it was, to be honest, because I didn't really notice that that's what she was doing, painting the eyes on the wall. I think I just assumed that she put them there from the melting bodies that they had discarded.
And that they just, like, grew
that she, like,
6 times their original size.
Please, so I honestly didn't put a lot of thought into it. There's some things where I'm just like, it's Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean,
eyes on the wall.
To a point, yes. She starts yelling at one point, "Stop it, stop it," and, like, hits herself in the head with her flashlight. And this got me thinking, because of later on when we see Ganger Cleves holding her head, that there was something going on between the two of them. Or not the two of them, but that the two of them were evidence of something going wrong with the Ganger's brains. Because they both seem to be having, like, head pain and stuff. So I was like, oh, are we going to find out that these things are, like, mayflies and they can be a full human being but only last for, like, 5 or 6 hours or something like that? But then it turns out to be a whole different thing with Cleves, and we don't really get an explanation. I like, is it supposed to be that she's hearing voices?
I don't know.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing stuff. So then we have the scene where she's, like, telling everybody that they, that it's us or them, and that they escaped, and we're going to be trying to flood the thing with gas, but they're going to try and get out, and what do you think they'll do? And Cleves is like, Ganger Cleves is like, oh, well, I know what I'd do, is get above it, try to get power back up, and then probably send a message. And I really liked Dickon, is it? Is he the one that's like got the son?
Yeah.
No, Jimmy.
Oh yeah, Jimmy's the one with the son. Dickon is the other one. Dickon.
Yeah. Jimmy is saying that they should just attack if she is so confident about where they're going to be coming out. And she says, it's a narrow doorway. I could defend it easy enough. So can she. And I rather liked these moments of, like, knowing exactly yourself so much that you can, you know, later on she's able to say exactly what the code word would have been. Mm-hmm. That is one of those things that I am desperate to know. Because, like, let's be real, everybody. We can't remember our own passwords most of the time. So I would love to see if this were to happen, if another version of you were to create a code word on the fly, and it was a game show, let's say, and you had to figure out what the code was, what percentage of the time you would even get that right? Because she gets it right here, and there's a vibe to it that she really, like, this is a code word that she's used before. But I feel like that's
but then
not
only
a guarantee.
she would know.
Right. Because, you know, they'll ask you questions, like, to safeguard your passwords and stuff. And they'll be like, what's your favorite TV show? And God help me if I can remember 7 years later what I said my favorite TV show was.
Right.
When I was filling out my Sally Mae information. Like, you know, and that's like an actual answer, not just like random words. So I feel like I would not be great at this, is what I'm saying. I would definitely not have come up with the exact code phrase needed. But, okay. I'm trying to see where we go next, because we're hanging out, like, both doctors are fixing something, and I admit that I lost the thread here about what it was that they were even doing. It's like they're trying to bring power back, but they're also trying to, like, filter the air or something?
Which, the gangers or the humans?
No, the two doctors.
Oh. Yeah, yes. Because they were trying to, like, they were filling it with choky gas. And so they're trying to filter that out so that so the rest of them don't choke to death. Mm-hmm. And then they're trying to get the radio so that they can contact the mainland again.
Okay.
So they're trying to get the power online.
Right. Okay. So yeah, they're working on that before the whole thing with the
and
they're
also doing it to try to find Rory and Jennifer.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that, because Rory's like out here following Jennifer, but at a distance and with some caution, but not enough. And meanwhile, Amy is a little flipped out at this double doctor action, and she's also very worried about Rory and kind of wants to go out on her own to manage it. And it's not... I really felt bad for Rory. In, like, this whole thing, he's alone, really? You know? And having to just figure stuff out. And granted, he chose this. He ran off when they were trying to, like, regroup. But it did seem like... So, it's just... I'm very protective of Rory. I've said it before, and I'll say it again.
Well, he needs to be protected at all costs.
He do. So, okay. We have the weird scene where the one doctor that we find out later was actually the correct doctor, and by correct I mean original that we know doctor, is the one that shoves Amy against the wall and starts screaming at her? Right?
Yes. She thinks it's the ganger.
Right.
But it's not. It's the doctor.
This isn't put on, is it? This is a genuine, like, episode that he just had here?
Yes. Sometimes they have the Doctor make choices that I'm like, I felt this way more with David Tennant, where he would like suddenly just like start shouting at people. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, why are you doing this? That's not effective. And this is one of the rare times that I feel like the Doctor was written in a way where I'm like, well, but why did you react that way? Mm-hmm. Even though he is intentionally trying to pretend to be the ganger to convince Amy that there's nothing to be prejudiced about. Behaving that way in a way that he wouldn't normally towards Amy makes me wonder if it's partially because he knows it's not Amy. But
that's interesting. I hadn't considered that.
That's like headcanon because it's not anything that is discussed or, you know, even marked upon.
Right. Yeah, because like his reaction is in response to her saying that I have seen you die, and he says why, and she says because you invited us to see it.
Oh, right.
And he grabs her and shoves her against the wall. And then keeps yelling why. It's all the eyes say why. I can feel them as they work each day knowing the time was coming for them to be thrown away again. Not again, please. And then they are destroyed and they feel death. And all they can say is why. So it's a super confusing moment for me because it felt at first that he was reacting to her saying that she saw his death.
Yep.
But then he's talking about the ganger deaths.
I honestly think that this is the writers trying to not have the audience think that this is the Doctor. That we're supposed to believe it's the ganger, and he is speaking about the flesh in the way that Jennifer is. That they feel it when they die.
I mean, but so you don't think there's an actual explanation? You just think that it's like a misdirect that wasn't really compensated for well.
I do. Because at first when she talks about I saw you die, and he's like at that point his like why? What like, is a surprise. Like what?
Right.
But then he goes into all this talk about what the eyes feel and what the flesh feels when they're melted down, as if he's not the actual Doctor. And if you pick it apart, that doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you think it's the ganger.
Right.
And the reason she says what she says is because she thinks he's the ganger. So she thinks it doesn't matter.
Right.
But for us, it's just like, well, his reaction isn't proportionate to what she's saying, and because he's the actual Doctor, like, even if he's trying to cover that up, how does it make sense to us as an audience that he has no reaction whatsoever, potentially, to finding out that she saw him die 200 years in his future?
Well, that's frustrating.
Yeah, this kind of stuff is just not the kind of stuff that's been happening on this show since Stephen Moffat took over. Like, the planning seems to be really well thought out. Because Stephen Moffat loves to have a long, drawn-out mystery. And maybe it's partially because this season the mystery hasn't been as obvious until now. Like, there's a mystery of Amy's pregnancy, kind of.
It just feels like you could misdirect in this way. I feel like you could do this effectively without it being something that just totally lacks explanation once you know what's going on.
Yeah. I've never been a big fan of these episodes.
Okay.
And I think it kind of shows when we're trying to pick it apart. Like, we had a really interesting conversation about, like, the meaning of, like, are these people?
Right.
Last week. But this whole conclusion episode, for me, has never, it's one of these episodes where I'm just like, like I wasn't really looking forward to rewatching it, and I wasn't really looking forward to talking about it other than the reveal that Amy isn't Amy.
Mm-hmm.
For me, nothing else about these episodes really meant anything to me. I didn't feel what I often feel for the characters. And I liked certain parts of it, and I love Rory sort of doing his own thing and making his own decisions and not just like being a puppy along for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately these episodes just don't do anything for me, and this might be part of the problem, is because there's just too much where I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why? When I feel like season 5 didn't really have any episodes where I was just like, fine. And
I mean, there were like little things that I was like, okay, that doesn't really work. But it was all stuff that I was mostly willing to overlook because everything else worked. And that's like, you reach critical mass on stuff that you're starting to overlook. And then you're like, well, come on.
Right. I feel like this particular episode is just not as strong as what the show has managed to be for the last season and a half. And it doesn't hold together.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It just feels a little too reminiscent of the Russell T Davies stuff, where it's like a lot of Deus Ex Machina, a lot of like, this is the way it is because we say so, and we don't need to give it any kind of reason because we just need it to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like one of our biggest complaints about the previous seasons, was like there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Where it just resolves itself and you're just like, okay. And all the way up to what you were saying at the beginning about there not being any sort of explanation about what's going on with Amy. Just like, she is not Amy, I'm going to melt her now. And no explanation to her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Or to her, who in that moment is like, what are you talking about?
That was particularly egregious after an episode where the doctor is treating the gangers like they are full people.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that he believes they have personhood, and that's absolute. And this isn't just like some copy that took her place. This is a copy that's being controlled by her somehow.
And
so
it's a copy
she's even more connected to it than they were to the others.
Yeah. And I understand, like, that's exactly why he needed to cut off the connection.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't explain that.
No. And I feel like maybe that's why he was more willing to do it with her, as the others weren't connected to us. So they weren't like an offshoot. They were whole individual people. And he knows that this Amy is not its own whole individual person and is still connected to her. So maybe that's why he was so like, unmoved by it. But it did feel just like in that moment, she doesn't know what she is. So you're just directing a weapon at her. She's saying, Doctor, I'm very frightened. And you are absolutely not offering her any comfort or reassurance of any kind.
Right. He's treating her
cruel.
like a thing.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know she's a thing. And she's not a thing. You've proven it.
Yeah. Although...
Yeah, it's weird.
I guess he would say she was a thing because this one is a puppet and not its own person.
It's not really a puppet.
I mean, they can control them through a psychic link on their harness. That sounds like a puppet.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, she is being controlled by Amy's brain, but Amy doesn't know that's what's happening. Neither of them know that that's what's happening. So you have to look at her like a victim. She doesn't know she's not real, that she's not a human. Don't just point a weapon at her, and you have said before that your screwdriver is a weapon. Mm-hmm. And then have her be that scared and have her husband standing there and not giving him an explanation. It just doesn't feel... It feels like really callous writing that was trying to go for some kind of shock value instead of caring about the characters, which for the most part, the show has done really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why these episodes just never really resonated with me, because ultimately, other than Amy not being Amy, it has no consequence for anything else.
Yeah. Well, all right, we got to get through this, though, even though I think we are both in agreement that this does not really work. So we have the whole thing with Rory beginning to realize that he has been bamboozled, because the thing that he did to, like, get them access to this area was, it was purported to clean the air. But evidently what Jennifer is aiming to do is release, like, acid gas again.
Yeah.
This was, like, another thing that I was kind of like, okay, but you have human body parts, and you are going to be susceptible to this also, and you don't have your acid suit on right now. So she was, like, leaving herself very vulnerable. Just, like, because they are all wearing their acid suits to remind us that they can be hurt by this stuff. But then she is out here trying to use these weapons without protecting herself at all, which makes me feel like the show is trying to act like they are made out of a different material than people.
It's not releasing acid gas. It controls the temperature. So it lets the acid boil, which will then burn through things and, like, collapse the whole island. And she wants to get off the island because the rescue team is coming. So she basically wants to cause the whole monastery or whatever it is to collapse and kill them all.
Inside it.
But she's planning, her plan is to get to the evac and get off the island and leave everybody else there to die.
Okay. Okay. I see. Oh, God. All right. Yeah, let's talk about this, like, flesh pile. I don't know what is happening here. I had asked you last week what the deal was with how they, like, disposed of them if something happened. And I'm not entirely sure why. And it's really precious because, like, Rory is just so horrified by this, which I understand that instinct, but also I do not understand how this happened or why. She says discarded flesh, faulty, probably. Just thrown away. Look at them. Which I have a lot of questions about how flesh can be faulty. How does that happen? And then it's not just, like, burned or properly disposed of. It's just thrown in a hole with with what looks like a prison uniform on.
I think it's their, like, orange, or their suits, their jumpsuits that they wear.
This is just such a weird thing. This choice.
And, yeah, like, putting them just in a pile, like, oh, these ones don't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, you're working on an acid farm, basically, so why don't you just throw them in the acid? You know, it burns them up. Instead of this, like, mishmash pile where they're all sort of, I don't know, melding into each other.
Basically. It just felt like they really wanted to do a, like, you know, discarded like nothing but cord wood, shock moment, look at our oppression kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in practice, this just doesn't make sense to have done.
Right.
And so Rory getting so emotional about this without just, like, asking what, because he says the company, how could they do this? How could they? We must say something. We must do something. And, of course, Jennifer says, who are the real monsters? And I'm like, Rory! Babe! Do you hear what she said to you just now?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. But he's just so, like, horrified by this thing, which I understand, but also we know that it's like, at least as far as this wiki has told us, Austin, the flesh is not fully conscious. It doesn't seem like, always. It seems like it became fully conscious due to that storm, but it's not usually.
It is when it's connected to them, when they're in their harnesses, I guess, and they are unconscious and they're controlling their ganger. But then once they're awake, their ganger is not awake anymore.
So then this pile isn't fully conscious.
You would think that's what they've told us.
Because that's like, she literally says, left to rot, fully conscious. And I'm like, but no, that's not how
right.
this goes.
That's not what was established. And now we're supposed to think that it's these creatures that are just like Cassandra without being strung up at like a trampoline.
Oh my God.
Just like in pain, left to suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent storytelling about your creature.
It's a shame because it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
You know, I really it was making me ask a lot of questions about
Well, it was
it
more
means.
interesting before.
Yeah, agreed.
And then in this one, when they tried to turn one of them into some kind of supervillain, instead of all of them just being like, no, we are people too. Mm-hmm. That's a more interesting story to tell, but instead we had to have, stretch monster, Spider Woman, whatever the fuck she turned into at the end.
Yeah, so let's talk about Cleves, because Cleves basically, Jennifer's got, honestly, a lot of very valid points about the way that, the flesh is being used across the world and slaves and whatever. And again, the flesh that's being used across the world, it didn't seem like it is the same case as with these guys. But regardless, and at one point, Cleves just seems to get bored of the whole thing. It's not even like she has a solution to offer or an alternative. She just says to Jennifer, this whole revolution you're talking about, what's the point? What's the point? What do you mean, what's the point? That's the point. There are millions of you out there being enslaved. What do you mean?
What was the point of you guys deciding to fight against the humans and go and steal the acid suits?
Yeah.
You are alive. You want to be treated like you're alive and not like you're a thing. So, yeah. Again, inconsistent writing.
So then she's basically, she says to Jennifer, why would I want to, be in a world with a bunch of people like you? You've become a monster, which I just don't know why that is the other option. Either remain enslaved or everyone turns into Jennifer. What? Since when?
I don't even really understand how Jennifer turned into Jennifer.
No, there's not really a lot of explanation about, how this all came to be. She was just somehow more evolved. But yeah, so they set up all of this revolution and oppression and mistreatment, and then they have the people being oppressed and mistreated just genuinely go, oh well, and throw in with the people they were fighting against. Which just, what is happening? Why did you set it all up then? It was mystifying. I could not, I genuinely stopped and rewound it, because when they finally decide to basically, defect and go to the humans, I thought I had, missed something that had happened or that was mentioned in the conversation. And it's just basically, they don't like Jennifer's tactics, so they're giving up on the idea of a revolution. Period. Flat out. Without thinking, oh, maybe we could do it a different way. It doesn't have to be that way. And I don't understand why you make the oppression the central focal point of the story, and then have them just basically shrug their shoulders and get over it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. They wrote themselves into a bigger story than they were prepared to tell.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so we have this meetup with Rory, who is allegedly going to be leading them to a safe place, and then Jennifer tricks them and separates them by a door, and he finally realizes that she tricked him, and it's really funny, too, because I guess the, like, assumption that Ganger Jennifer is making is that she's going to keep Rory as a pet. I don't know what she thinks is going to happen with him. It's like he's proven to be enough of one of the good ones that he gets to live. But he's certainly not going to back her up any further. So you may as well kill him too if you're going to kill everybody. Just get it done, you know? So then we have the moment where Rory realizes that the doctor is a ganger also and is sort of siding with the gangers, and you see his like poor little face as he begins to realize that there is nobody on his side in this room. The actual humans are over here lowering a cover on the like acid bath gas steam and trying to hold some things back and make time for themselves to get out. And in the confusion with the steam escaping, eventually Jimmy gets got by the gas to the chest. Honestly, a pretty like not so gnarly death as you would think if we're told that somebody got basically killed by acid to the heart.
Yeah, you would think it would just be like melting a hole right in the chest.
Yeah.
But I suppose they had to, first of all, it'd be really gory.
Yeah.
And they had to save their budget for the Spider Woman at the end.
The Spider Woman and the two doctors. Mm-hmm. There's an episode of Poirot. One of the most horrifying things I've ever seen, and it wasn't even that graphic, but this woman is getting ready for bed, and she has a glass of water by the bed, and she always, like, you know, chugs some with her pills, and she chugs some, and it turns out that somebody replaced her water with hydrochloric acid.
Oh my God. And
so her mouth basically gets burned out as she's trying to scream, and she, like, drowns in blood, essentially.
That's really gory for
Poirot. Fucking Poirot, which, like, there's barely any blood in that show ever. And it was just, and there's no blood in that scene. It's just that you know that's what's happening. And it's so upsetting. And I, like, kind of thought it was just me, but because I watch those shows, like, if I'm sick, I just straight up binge Poirot. That's, like, my comfort TV. But Owen was watching them with me at one point as I went back through them, and we came to that episode, and he was so horrified, and I felt way better. I was like, okay, I thought that I was just maybe a little oversensitive to, like, the concept of it. He was like, no, that was really fucked up to watch. He was like, I don't know, maybe it was just the actress doing a really good job, but Jesus Christ. So yeah, now when I think of, like, death by acid, I have that in my head, so...
This is a stupid question, but wouldn't the hydrochloric acid burn through the receptacle that it's in?
I do not know if it's reactive to everything.
Okay.
Because, I mean, in the old Breaking Bad, it eats through the ceramic bathtub, but it doesn't eat through... it doesn't eat through plastic. So I don't know, does glass fall into, you know what I mean? Does glass fall into the reactive category, or I don't know.
Okay, very quick aside. I started watching Breaking Bad, like, pretty early on when it first started airing. I watched the first episode and I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. Then I watched the second episode and I was like, nope! And I noped right out of there. I was like, this is not for me. It's not for me. That was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen on film. It's not for me. And I walked away from that show. And then, like, 4 years later, right around when it was ending, and everybody was, like, still talking about how great it is, eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to give it another try. Mm-hmm. So I rewatched the first episode with Jason, and I was like, you're on your own for episode 2. I'll come back for episode 3. I couldn't even watch it again.
I really want to know, I'm sure it's like in trivia somewhere, what they used for the material.
It was so disgusting.
Oh, hugely so, yeah. That show is so fucking...
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I gave it another try and just skipped that episode because the show's perfect, but that was just too much for me to handle. I just couldn't. It's like, if this is what I'm not doing this.
Yeah, not a representation, like, but I understand that for sure. So yeah, real. We have like basically this dude being like, all right, I'll take your place and we'll pretend that nothing ever happened to you, which is really kind of messed up, but it makes sense. And you know, this is all...
Well, he had to go be the daddy to that annoying child.
Daddy? Yeah, he sounded like the Where's My Mummy kid. Like, the tone of voice and everything?
Exactly, like the Where's My... In fact, Jason was watching part of it with me, and he went, are you my daddy? Are you my daddy? I was like, God, stop repeating yourself, child. Sorry, people with kids.
Alright, so yeah, we have the very touching scene with the birthday boy. Really, honestly, there were so many other things that deserve some time that I just didn't care. Yeah. And then we have the, what's-his-face sticking, desperately trying to close the door as this weird Jennifer monster begins to come at him. Mm-hmm. Honestly, this was like the most effective part of this episode for me, was him trying to close this door. This is me having to pee real bad as I drive home. And then my screen door latch won't unlatch as I'm trying to get in the house. Meanwhile, my body believes that I am in the bathroom and is just about to let go. And I'm like, no. Oh God. Him yanking on this door and nothing happening. I just really felt for him here. As you get older, man, your body thinks the moment you think of a bathroom that you're in the bathroom. It's just really frustrating. So anyway, this thing coming at him too, this monster, like the way they designed her, it's pretty like, the effects are bad, but it's just so freaky looking that it doesn't matter that the effects are bad. Like, yeah, it's still really, really fucking freaking me out though, so mission accomplished, I guess. So yeah, that's him, sacrificing for the team because that's the only door that locks. The other one doesn't lock, I guess. And then the TARDIS drops through the floor, and we have the Amy finding out that the doctor she thought was the doctor is not the doctor. And then we go, we have the Ganger doctor and Cleves staying behind in order to take out the Jennifer monster and buy them some time so that they can take off, I guess. Because they could have just left her there and she would have just burned in the acid, right?
Theoretically.
All right.
Unless the helicopter got there.
True. Can you imagine her driving that helicopter like that? I assume she can just, go back and take her old form again. But yeah, that's a moment. And then we have a nice moment with the doctor giving Cleves a cure for like whatever is going on in her brain.
Yeah.
Which is a small throwaway thing, but just made me feel better personally. I liked it. And
she has a blood clot in her brain.
That's what it is. Right. And he pulls a balloon out of nowhere.
Yeah, I don't know why.
It's a real Pennywise little, like, red balloon.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. And then when Jimmy goes to see his son, who's standing by himself at the beach.
Right.
Like, just standing there. It's also a very Pennywise moment of, like, there's George, and there's Pennywise with his balloons.
Hello, Georgie.
We all float.
Yeah, he's got 2 balloons when he shows up. Mm-hmm. So, apparently the TARDIS has, like, a little helium tank in there somewhere. And
it's got everything else.
Yeah, why not, you know? And then they drop off Cleves and Dickon, and they are going to speak on behalf of the flesh. And I just think that's not going to work out.
Probably
Nobody
not.
will listen to them. Practically guaranteed. As soon as they're like, well, you know, but Dickon's flesh.
No, they'll kill him.
They will absolutely cut him open.
They're going to speak in front of an army press conference. You tell me that soldiers aren't going to be like, kill it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I just, you know, I understand that this is meant to be like a moment of feeling that something is going to be accomplished. But after what we have all gone through in the past, like, couple of years of seeing how much evidence we can have to support a thing and how much people will just still ignore it because they just feel like it, I don't have a lot of faith in that happening.
Yeah.
And then Amy doubles over and she is in pain. The doctor seems unsurprised and says, get her into the TARDIS. And the whole, like, Rory, what's happening to her? Contractions. She's going into labor. Did he really say no? Of course he didn't. No, of course he didn't. You're going to start having to explain some things, doctor. What, about the birds and the bees? Shut the fuck up, Doc. You know very well what, sir. And then he says, I needed to see the flesh in its early days. That's why I scanned it. That's why we were there in the first place. I was going to drop you off for fish and chips first, but things happened and there was stuff and shenanigans.
That's a good word, shenanigans.
Meanwhile, Amy's behind him saying it hurts and he's ignoring her practically. I needed enough information to block out the signal from the flesh. And again, he's still not, he's just staring. Rory says, what signal? Or no, Amy says, what signal? And he says, the signal to you. And then he tells Rory to stand away from her. And he does. Given what we've learned, I'll be as humane as I can, but I need to do this and you need to stand away. And he zaps Amy and she disappears into a pile of dust. And then all of a sudden Amy is in this like weird white lit pod, and a woman, her face pokes through, and this lady was in Midsummer Murders. She was on Poirot. She was in another thing too. I'm trying to look through and see because her voice is unbelievable. I really wish she did some audiobooks or something. And yeah, she is leaning through and telling her that, yeah, you're ready to pop, huh? It's time. Push. Push, little one's on its way. And she's so creepy. She's so deeply creepy, and I really hated it. And as she says, here it comes, Amy just begins to scream, and that is the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's the time where she should be unconscious. Is during the labor where all the pain happens.
What do you mean unconscious?
She's been unconscious pretty much this whole
because
time.
she was connected to the flesh. I got you. Yeah. Well, apparently it broke through because the flesh was having pain also.
Yeah. Well, there was too much of a connection. Or maybe over time the connection grows stronger where they bleed into each other more. Because Amy was seeing the eye patch lady with a lot of frequency. But Amy in the pod doesn't seem to be aware of anything.
Right.
Until now.
Yeah, she's having kind of a Rory appearing in ancient Rome moment.
Yeah.
Where, you know, he just didn't know what happened and he just looked up and was in Rome. Although he had Roman memories and she doesn't have, I would imagine, pod memories. Maybe she does.
Well, we'll see. We don't know exactly what this has been like for her, how often she's been conscious and or not. Because it seems like she sort of awakens when the flesh Amy is melted.
I really enjoy that everybody calls it melting. Because it is. And, like, I'm saying, like, you know, she's a pile of ash because that's how the effect looks sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, when the Doctor and Cleves kind of turn into dust. I mean, it looks like dust with them. But with Amy, it does look much more liquidy.
Yeah.
Reminded me, have you seen Amelie?
Yes.
It reminded me of that moment where she's, like, really sad and embarrassed and she just, like, dissolves into the floor in a puddle. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what the fuck. It seems like she got gripped up by somebody who wanted her baby for some reason. And I don't know if they just figured out that she had a time baby and they were like, "Oh, want that time baby. We need it."
Why would it be a time baby?
I don't know, but we saw some little child wandering around with fucking regenerative powers. So I'm just like, okay, that's Amy's kid, I guess? I don't know what's happening.
When do you think this happened?
I don't even know what time we're actually in.
Well, from what we've seen, when was the last time you thought Amy is Amy?
The time that I would see it being easiest to grab her is sometime when she's dealing with those aliens, the Silence, because she doesn't remember stuff. So if there's a blank in her memory that is very easily explained as having been the Silence, it could be from when she was in the bathroom with, what was her name, Joy?
Yeah.
Poor Joy. Or it could be in the, no, I was going to say it could be in the house with, like, you know, the fucking orphanage. But she sees the woman looking through the slit while she's there. So it's already happened by then. So, yeah, I'm going to say in the bathroom. Because the Silence is places for a reason. And it just hanging out in the bathroom. It was a real weird fucking play. So I feel like it was there for her. But I don't know why they want her or the baby and who this lady is and how she's associated with the Silence because she looks like a human. Mm-hmm.
We also don't know when that is.
True. Yeah, I don't know. Stop asking all these questions.
People like to hear your guesses.
I bet they do. I bet you sick perverts love hearing me just say wrong things. You disgust me. Get some therapy.
Isn't that the whole point of being unspoiled?
You know what? Y'all need to go to church.
How did we ever get prongs without getting Rashawn to try to guess what that is?
Oh my god, Rashawn has been re-listening to the show from the beginning
really?
To comfort herself. Oh. And she keeps texting me shit that we're saying and cracking up over it and just being like really touched or like just earlier today she wrote, "How were we this so funny right from the start though?" And I was like, see, this is why I bullied you into doing this with me, because you didn't want to, I would remind you all. But, yeah, the couple of moments of things that she realized re-listening that she, like, kind of got right out of the gate, and that I just, like, did not react to or made fun of. And she was like, I really hate you. You just, like, mocked me, and I was fucking right. And I was like, well, what was I gonna do?
Right. I'm gonna tell you you're right about stuff?
Yeah. So, I don't know, like, and even if it is, like, you know, I keep saying that the time baby is Amy's baby that we see regenerating or whatever.
How does that make sense, though?
It doesn't make any sense, because why would it be in an orphanage? Why did, like...
Well, but why would it, if it's Amy's baby, why would it have those capabilities?
Radiation?
Amy's a human. What?
Radiation?
Radiation.
I don't know. You know, as she put it, you know, we spend some time on the TARDIS and there's, you know, like...
She thought she was maybe going to have a baby that had an extra head.
Well, extra head, regenerative capabilities, I mean...
Let's she call it a time head? Just one of its faces is actually just the face of a clock.
Would this desk were a time desk? Yeah, I don't know how that could be. I don't know why it would be, like, in an orphanage all alone. Why the Cylons would want it.
Right. I just don't know how that can be her baby. I think they want us to think that because, like, there's two different things going on here.
Maybe it's Amy.
Maybe it is Amy.
Maybe it's young Amy, and we didn't know it, but
she's
she
actually
could
a Time Lord.
Yeah.
She just doesn't know that yet. Just like she didn't know she was the Flesh, she's also a Time Lord.
Maybe the Doctor knocked up the TARDIS while she was in human form. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe this is his kid. And,
that makes more sense than it being Amy's kid
and
that can now regenerate
got
dissolved
or whatever. Her pregnancy just spontaneously implanted in Amy instead. So Amy's not giving birth to a child that is even related to her.
Well, that doesn't make sense.
Sure it does. Listen, if you can draw eyes on the wall with flesh and an hour later walk by a wall of eyeballs, absolutely nothing on this show, quote, doesn't make any sense.
I suppose anything is possible because it's sci-fi. But yeah, there was a kid that regenerated, which is a question mark.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't have any theories. That's it. I've run out. Is there any... Did you find out what the flesh is made out of on this show?
Oh, it didn't say.
Damn it. I really want to know. It looks like when you'd make paste out of flour and water as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of looks like that to me.
Yeah, it's probably something like that, or like that plus like whatever they use to make slime. Because it's sort of viscous,
Gacky.
but yeah. Which apparently, like, that's a thing that kids do now. They buy these, like, slime kits.
I mean, there's whole YouTube channels devoted to making slime.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's a fucking industry, man.
I don't understand.
There was somebody, I like, back in the days where I enjoyed making myself angry for fun, there was somebody who had, like, a YouTube channel where all they did was, like, make slime of different kinds. And from YouTube, they were raking in something like $2,000 a week in income. And had, like gone and bought a house and quit their job and everything.
Because why? Because kids would watch the videos?
I guess.
And they would generate ad dollars?
Revenue? Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
And, you know, it wasn't like a real flash in the pan thing. It didn't sound like. They had been at that rate for over a year. So, I mean, even if it doesn't last, you have time to put some money in stocks or something, then you'd be all right.
Yeah, that's what we need to do, is find out what kids are interested in, like, that's new, and then start making videos about that thing.
With lots of swearing. To be a good influence.
Right.
I have to stay on brand, Jamie.
To be the best influence.
Yeah.
As far as trivia goes, the only really interesting things are that the confusion about Amy's pregnancy scanner is explained now. And
right.
That the Ganger doctor uses the voices of the 1st, 3rd, 4th, and 10th doctors when he's stabilizing.
Which ones? 3rd?
1st, 3rd, 4th, and 10th.
Oh. Which was the 10th?
He just says, I think at the end he says, "Trust me, I'm the doctor."
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, okay. And I read that it was audio from Girl in the Fireplace.
Oh, okay. I didn't pick up on that. Okay.
Yeah, it didn't sound so much like David Tennant, like it wasn't obvious.
No.
The first one, the first doctor I recognized because the audio sounded pretty old. The 4th one, because that was one that said the jelly baby thing, and there's something deep in the recesses of my brain that makes me believe that, because I saw some of those episodes when I was a kid on PBS.
Very funny.
So something about the jelly baby thing made me think that was the 4th doctor. I suppose I could be wrong about that. But I recognized his voice, Tom Baker's voice.
Mm-hmm.
The 3rd one went right past me. I don't know him at all.
That's kind of cool, though. I like the idea of getting old audio and just, like, pulling it out like that. I just wish that I had noticed it, because that's a fun detail.
Yeah.
There was something else that I was going to ask about with this episode, and I'm drawing a blank on what it was. I'm trying to, like, go back through real quick to see if I could find... No, I don't know. Oh, well. This Jennifer monster. Did you make that Jennifer's head on her neck, the image for the group?
Do you still have those screen caps?
No, I sent them to you via text and then I deleted them from my computer.
I accidentally was trying to delete... Remember I sent you a news story the other day, and for whatever reason, it kept playing a video in the text message?
Oh, yeah, that was weird.
It was weird. And I was trying to delete just that, and I ended up deleting our entire text history.
Wow. I get it. Cool, Jamie. You don't have to lie about how it happened.
No,
I understand. You just want to forget about me. It's fine.
I realized as we were starting, I was like, oh, I need to put that picture up as our picture. I realized, like, you released the episode, so I wanted to do it. And I went to our text message, and I was like, oh, fuck. I lost everything.
Aw.
And I thought maybe, like, next time we texted, it would just reappear, but it didn't. It's all gone. I'm really sad about it. And it's not even like I go back through and read old text messages, because who does that? I don't do that. But all the pictures and everything are gone. The whole history is gone. So if you don't have them anymore, then maybe I'll try to make a screen cap myself and throw it up.
I think if you Google the episode, you'll find it, because that seems to be a pretty popular image. Because I went
of her coming through the bathroom door, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because you sent it to me at a weird time where I was like, oh, I'll do it later, and then I forgot about it, legitimately, and then I erased everything. Like a person who's never used a phone before.
Oh, you know what I had meant to talk about was just the moment where her mouth grows out. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, this is one of those things that I never understand. When a person sees something horrifying and they don't immediately begin to sprint in the other direction. He's just mesmerized and staring at her. And I would absolutely have vacated the fucking building by the time her jaw reaches full capacity. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be that she literally swallows him whole, which is, I mean, or she just bites his head off. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's a bit on Buffy where something like this happens. And
yes.
It's so sudden and unexpected, and it gave me the heebie-jeebies so bad when it happened. And that is one of the moments that whenever I think about truly frightening and also surprising, not like the kind of scares that happen when you are waiting for them and tense, but a scare that happens really out of left field that you weren't ready for at all. That is the moment that I think of. And this reminded me of that, except it's like much more sort of stretched out. So, well, see what I did there? That was an accident. Stretched out, so to speak. But I do think that the opening of a mouth further than usual is a very simple and effective way of making somebody look utterly terrifying. It's just guaranteed to be uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah.
Like making people's eyes slightly bigger than they're supposed to be. And you're just kind of like, what? No, what is that? Like, just enough to give them a bit of a chibi look or a Bratz doll look. You know? Ugh. Dislike.
Back when Lord of the Rings first came out, a lot of people wondered if they enhanced Elijah Wood's eyes, made them bigger and bluer, and like Peter Jackson had to come forward and be like, no, those are just his eyes. Like, that's what he looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, he got crazy eyes.
Yeah, his eyes are... You think they're blue, and if you ever get to see him in person, they're even bluer. He's like a little alien.
It always makes you think of Liz Lemon talking about, what's her boss's name? Jack. And saying his eyes are the color of a Mykonos sky. Which is just so funny. All right. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap this one up?
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for listening. I hope that you're not too mad at me. And, if you are, get over it. What can I say? And we will see you next week with a new episode. Oh, by the way, our fundraiser's at 97%. So we're nearly there. Keep it coming, kids.
So close.
Become a patron, patreon.com/unspoiled if you would like to listen to me and Rashawn cover Song of Ice and Fire. All right. See you next week. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.